Yo, 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 welcome to the FRQ Keyword Breakdown. So today we're going to learn how to write an FRQ. Let's dive right in. So every FRQ has bolded keywords that tell you what to do. Your answer must include the details that the keyword is asking for, no more, no less. So on the right side here, you guys definitely see all the possible keywords a free response in the AP Environmental Science exam may have. So we have calculate, describe, explain, identify, justify, make a claim, and propose a solution. So let's go over the first one, calculate. Calculate, as defined by College Board in the CED, is to perform mathematical steps to arrive at a final answer, including algebraic expressions, properly substituted numbers, and correct labeling of units. Showing work is required, and that last part is key, y'all. You must show work on math calculations in order to get the point for that question. To get both points, you guys need setup as well as the work. Okay, so dimensional analysis is the best way to ensure you have the correct setup. Let's take a look at an example. D. It says, assume that all the runoff that you calculated in part C is captured by the storm sewers in one day. Calculate the volume of untreated water in meters cubed that bypasses the plant as a result of the storm. Note that the plant still receives 5,000 meters cubed of domestic sewage per day. So we have the two numbers that we have. Notice the answer, y'all. The answer has units, okay? Units as well as the work shown. The final answer is boxed neatly and identified with the unit as well. So there we have it, y'all. Calculate. The next keyword is describe. Describe, defined by College Board, is to provide the relevant characteristics of a specified topic. So one way I like to think about this is just that describe must include details of a process. So you must communicate all the information about the process you are describing. For example, describe how you would purchase a homecoming ticket. So details to mention would be where, when, how much the tickets are, and whether or not you can pay with a check or must pay with cash. And all these details are something that someone needs to know. So let's take a look at an example. 2. Describe one realistic strategy to reduce deforestation in a less developed country. So let's look at the answer that College Board provides. This has only a total of 1 point that you can earn, and the potential answers are listed there. Let's take a look at the couple. Enact or enforce laws or regulations that restrict cutting of trees, or encourage sustainable agriculture forestry programs. Let's take a look at some examples. So this first example, one realistic strategy to reduce deforestation in developing countries is to send or give them some of our resources or to help them in any way so that deforestation is no longer needed in that country or lifestyle. So what do you guys think? Does this earn the point or was it too generic? You guessed it, y'all. It was too generic. A good answer would be a realistic strategy to reduce deforestation in these less developed countries is to subsidize companies if they don't clear cut, but instead cut down trees in a scattered, more sustainable manner. This way, the companies can still use timber or lumber, but the trees will grow back in a manner that ensures ecological resilience. So this one has clear details that help describe the situation other than a generic answer like the first example where the student just simply says giving resources. The solution here is to subsidize companies giving money to companies that chose to use a different technique. And so the student further describes the technique used, y'all. This is a very good answer that earned 1 point. Since describe is very, very important, y'all, let's look at another example. So this is another question from College Board. Nitrate levels exceeding in the United States Environmental Protection Agency's primary drinking water standard have been found in the groundwater of areas with intensive agriculture. Number 2, describe how the practice you identified in C1 leads to elevated nitrate levels in groundwater. So let's take a look at how many points this deserves. Again, this only deserves 1 point, right? So the student can earn a potential of 1 point. Nitrates infiltrate, percolate, or seep into groundwater is a potential description. Nitrates entering surface waters that recharge aquifers must connect surface with groundwater is another potential. Let's take a look at another example of a student's response to this prompt. So notice that the student here noted where part 2 was. So 2, when it rains, the fertilizer runoff into a body of water or sinks into the soil. With continued use, the nitrates would pile up over time. So again, this is a potential answer. Let's take a look at the second example in order to determine which one is the better choice. Number 2. After irrigation, inorganic nitrate fertilizers enter agricultural runoff into bodies of water that feed groundwater, or dissolves in water and infiltrate into groundwater. So notice the clear difference, y'all. This second example has a description of the nitrate going specifically into the groundwater and describes a different way of saying runoff. So dissolves in water, infiltrate into the groundwater. So number 2 is the better choice. So explain is another key word. It is very, very important, and there are 2 types of explain. Number 1, explain could also come in how, and that typically requires analyzing the relationship, process, pattern, position, situation, or outcome. And the other part of explain could potentially be an explain why, and that typically requires analysis of motivations or reasons for the relationship, etc. Okay. Also could be phrased as give one reason. Let's break explain down into simpler words. So for explain questions, we typically pick 2 ideas, 2 processes related to the topic of the question and explain each in detail. So the explain questions must have 3 parts, y'all. We identify the idea or process, give the how the process works, and finally, why the process is significant or the outcome of it. So explain how you would get ready for the homecoming dance and is an example. So to answer this question, y'all, we need to describe the process. So we go get our hair done, get a haircut at a certain place. We must call to reserve that haircut appointment. That's the how that process works to get that hair done. And why is it important to get the hair done is to look good for that homecoming dance. Let's take a look at an example prompt that would be given about explain. So D, acid deposition has affected soil quality in many parts of the northeastern United States. 1. Explain one way acid deposition onto soil can affect plant health. So we see that this question is worth 1 point, and these are the potential answers, y'all. Increased soil acidity may be outside of the optimal range of tolerance for the plant, resulting in poor plant growth or death. Acid can leach cations, metal ions, nutrients from soil, making them less available to plants, thus decreasing growth. Aluminum is released and can be toxic to plants, etc. Let's take a look at some students' examples. Example number 1. Some plants cannot live when the soil pH gets too low. Acid deposition decreases the pH of soil and can eventually kill the plant. So this answer looks good at the first glance. Let's take a look at example number 2 to compare which one is the better answer. Acids leach nutrient ions, potassium, nitrates, and phosphorus from the soil and withhold them from plants. And deficiencies in these macronutrients, which are determinants of plant growth, will cause diminished growth or premature death in plants. So this one is super crucial in the details provided. And it links ideas as well. It says that nutrients are leached by acid, connected the idea that these macronutrients are determinant of plant growth, meaning they determine whether a plant will grow or not. And also the result will cause diminished growth or premature death in plants. So this is a perfect answer, whereas the first example is not. Okay. Every student loved these types, and you should eventually learn to love this one as well. Identify. Identify, according to College Board, is to indicate or provide information about a specific topic without elaboration or explanation. So an easy way to think about this is just an idea, one idea. So our example question would be, when is homecoming? Homecoming is October 18th. So that is an example of identify. We simply state that idea. We answer it. When is homecoming? We know when homecoming is, and we state that answer. Be careful not to continue on and answer incorrectly, because you will lose a point if you contradict yourself. Homecoming is October 18th. It starts tomorrow. So tomorrow obviously isn't October 18th, so therefore you would contradict yourself and will get no point. Let's take a look at an example. C. Suppose that a nuclear power plant is constructed on the Fremont River site. 1. Identify the most likely pollution threat that the plant will pose to the Fremont River as a result of the plant's normal daily operation. 1 point can be earned for correctly identifying thermal pollution as the most likely pollution threat. Release of radioactive waste is not part of the normal operation of a nuclear power plant, so mentioning release of radioactive waste will not earn you point. So example number 1, as a result of the daily operation of the plant, radioactive materials such as spent fuel rods and uranium may leak into the groundwater. Oh, there it is, y'all. They said that radioactive material leak into the environment, and that's not an answer that is appropriate. So therefore this example is incorrect. Example number 2, y'all. The most likely pollution threat would be thermal pollution, the highly heated water from the daily operation. So again, this is a perfect answer. They answered the question without a lot of elaboration. They just define thermal pollution, but even just saying thermal pollution will get you that point. Moving along, justify. And justify, according to College Board, is to provide evidence to support, qualify, or defend a claim, and or provide reasoning to explain how that evidence supports or qualifies the claim. So let's work through an example to see what justify means. 2 countries shown on the graph have developed domestic energy sources, sugarcane in Brazil and tar sands in Western Canada. Which of the 2 energy sources is more sustainable? Justify your answer with an explanation. So we have here that it's worth 2 points, 1 point for the correct choice and another point for the correct explanation. So that you guys can see, we need to have an answer and justify it or give an explanation to why that is correct. So the correct answer accepted by College Board was that sugarcane is more sustainable, and any of the following explanation would be correct. It is considered to be a renewable resource. Sugarcane can be replanted. Sugarcane is not a fossil fuel, so new carbon is being consumed instead of old carbon. And finally, little toxic sludge and land destruction in comparison with harvesting tar sands. So the student's answer is sugarcane is more sustainable than tar sand. So that's the claim. Now the justification. It is a plant that can be harvested and essentially renewed every year. However, tar sand, in comparison, takes millions of years to form from the compression of organic materials, which essentially render it too slow to renew to be sustainable. So that is a perfect answer. So that's the perfect justification. It mentions that it can be harvested and renewed every year, sugarcane, while tearing down tar sand. So, make a claim is to make an assertion that is based on evidence or knowledge. Let's take a look at an example answer. As countries change during a demographic transition, there's often a growing demand for meat in human diets. It takes an estimated 1750 liters of water to produce 113 grams of beef. The average person in a more developed country consumes 85 grams of beef per day. 2. Make a claim to propose a solution that would reduce the amount of water required to produce enough food for individuals. So let's take a look at some accepted answers by College Board. So the response makes a claim to propose a solution that would reduce the amount of water required to produce enough food for individuals, and it needs to include one could potentially eat lower on the food chain, reduce consumption of animal protein. One could produce plant-based sources of protein, implement efficient irrigation for growing crops, etc. So there was no student example for that, so we're moving on to the last keyword, propose a solution. Propose a solution, provide a proposed solution to a problem based on evidence or knowledge. So our example, biological diversity or biodiversity has become a topic of great concern among conservationists. Biodiversity is often used by scientists and policymakers to help determine the health of ecosystems. C. For each human activity you discuss in B, propose a practical strategy other than simply banning the activity to reduce the loss of biodiversity. Let's take a look at some of the accepted answers. We have clearing land for construction, logging, clear-cutting, deforestations are activity examples. And let's take a look at solutions. So cluster development, smart growth for the clearing land. We can grow smarter. Develop urban boundaries, habitat conservation. And for logging, we can replant trees or use the selective cutting technique. This is a very good answer. So rather than taking expanses of land, bulldozing, and then building, urban areas would do better to cluster buildings. By clustering buildings, it allows a greater space to be saved for wildlife habitat without it being fragmented, thus creating an urban area and preserving wildlife. Instead of clear-cut logging, selective cutting poses a better choice for biodiversity. This makes it so the habitat remains whole. Also, when taking trees from a range of ages so as to promote diverse conditions. So again, it mentions the smart growth of clustering buildings together, as well as how to cut the forests. So FRQs could be broken down by topics as well. Anything that deals with the environment or ecologies, you have to mention animals and plants, soil and air. And you don't or shouldn't mention humans at all. So this can be expanded upon by saying, just talk about living and non-living factors in the environment or ecosystem, but never humans. A second concept would be economic. You'll see economy in your question. You just need to talk about money or jobs. Okay, so any topic that affects money and job will get you the point, y'all. So social or societal. So when you see this, you definitely need to mention people, cities, crops, or how people are impacted. Other things would be human diseases, laws, human birth and death rates. So those are the things to keep in mind. So when designing a lab, because that's always going to be FRQ number 1, you guys need to have these tips ready. Okay, so what is the independent variable? What is the dependent variable? Form a concise hypothesis which is testable. So again, make sure your hypothesis has a clear independent and dependent variable. Identify the control group to use for comparison with the experiment. So there should always be a control group, a normal conditions group that you guys can compare experimental treatment on. Okay, so clearly identify the experimental group. Types of measurement should be considered. So you need to quantify numbers. Okay, be specific. Rates of CO2 produced per minute type of deal. Statistical data. Provide reasonable data and try to give a time of collection. Also mention repeated trials because that's a very good lab design technique. You need repeated trials to eliminate luck. Draw a conclusion that support or rejects your hypothesis. Here, those are the tips to make a good experiment. Define or explain any terms you guys use in an FRQ question, y'all. Okay, say something about each of the important terms that you use if it is not identify. Identify is the only one where you guys can list it and just move on. Answer the question parts in order. Call or label them A, B, C as you guys see it in the question. Do not skip around when answering FRQs. Write clearly and neatly. Notice that Mr. Tran had a hard time reading some of the students' handwriting. So again, make it easier on the readers, y'all. And they might, appreciate it more. So next one is, if you don't remember the name of the concept, you guys can definitely describe the concept itself, and that will get you guys the point. Remember that no detail is too small to be included as long as it is to the point. We don't want fluff. I repeat, we don't want fluff. So use temporal language if possible. For example, during an earthquake, plates slide past each other rapidly. So that's describing that process, y'all, and how fast it is. So rapid is fast. If a chemical equation can be used to describe a process, then use it, y'all. Describe the biological cycle that removes carbon from the atmosphere. You guys can actually write down the photosynthesis equation, and that's one equation you guys need to memorize. Answer the question that is asked. I said that before at the beginning, and I'm saying it here again, y'all. Answer the question that is asked. For example, in 2014, question 1, it asked students to identify ways to reduce the use of electricity. Students missed the point because they answered about alternative energy instead, like using solar, but not ways to reduce it, y'all. You have to decrease the use. Strategies to decrease it, not to avoid it altogether. And then do not answer more than what is asked. If it asks for 2 reasons, y'all, then give 2 reasons, not 3. The reader cannot award points for your 3rd reason, even if it is correct. And if you guys give 3 reasons when asked for 2 reasons, and your 3rd reason is correct and your 2nd reason is wrong, you won't get the point for that 3rd reason. Overlisting and not listing in order will definitely hurt you on this AP exam. You have to be very specific. And last but not least, y'all, avoid using vague terminology. So examples of these vague terms would be pollution, factory, contamination, runoff, kills stuff, smokestack, it's bad, it's toxic, it's harmful, it's bad for the environment. These are vague phrases that you guys should avoid. You guys can use these terms, but expand upon it. Why is it bad for the environment? How is it harmful? What type of pollution? We will learn so many types of pollution, y'all. What contamination? What type of runoff? So again, listing these words without specifics will be detrimental to your FRQ chances of success. So here we have a list of phrases that you guys need to avoid unless you guys can use it specifically. Okay, bad for the environment or planet, cause environmental degradation. It sounds nice, but it's vague. Cause global warming and pollution. What type of pollution? So be very specific. That's all I want you guys to know. So these are 35 phrases to avoid using if you guys are not describing or explaining or expanding upon your generic phrase. Okay, that's it for today. Have a good one.